Dave Chappelle.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, I've never been a fan.
I was going to say, you have a whole thing about not ever being a fan of him.
I was too big of a Rick James fan.
Yeah.
Like a real lover of Rick James' work to ever have a lot of respect for Dave Chappelle.
Yeah.
Because he like single-handedly caricaturized him in a way that I feel like drove him to his grave.
Yeah.
And so I've just never been a fan, never gotten it, never understood why that's the kind of humor people are looking for. So that it's taken this turn really isn't shocking to me. And I'm just continually amazed that people continue to laugh and think that he's funny.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to the kids in school when I was in like junior high that would watch his show over and over and over again and then come to school and reenact it over and over again. And it was always the assholes. It was always the guys that were causing the problems for me, the bullies, and so I just go, yeah, the fact that that's who's always resonated with your work, it totally makes sense. And honestly, all of he walked away from all that, that money.
So did Lauryn Hill, which is a whole other conversation. But, it's interesting that there is a commonality of values in many ways. And so when I draw that comparison because of that reason, I'm like, well, why do we care?
Yeah.
Why do I care? Why am I supposed to care? And then I see people, men in particular, older than me, posting, I stand with Dave memes. And I'm just like, yeah, you're still 13. Yeah. You're still the bully in high school, and you still refuse to think about why this is harmful and why this is hurtful and why people are just saying, shut the fuck up. Don't want it anymore.
Yeah. Never really needed it. I mean, I keep going back to the people that always have just insisted to me that he's brilliant, have always been white men.
I don't know what that means.
That's always been white men telling me that.
Yes.
I guess I just feel like, don't we have a lot of other comedians that know how to be funny and speak to the times without being lazy? 'Cause that's ultimately what it is. It's being very lazy.
Well, I was going to say, I think that what they think is brilliant about it is that this man makes millions of dollars to do what they did for free in high school. So, yeah, I'm not interested. And Netflix really just...
Yeah. Well, Netflix is going to do what Netflix is going to do.
Yeah. Does Monique have an opinion on this? I'm just curious. But it's, again, though, when we have centered entertainment in such a way that it elicits this much conversation and that it is this much of the center. Like, I should not have seen this much about Dave Chappelle in my timeline for the last 2 weeks.
Right.
Because, really, it's, aside from the fact that it's offensive, like, why does he consume this much cultural ground? Why does he consume this much of people's hour-to-hour energy? But I feel like that about most of, like, the discourse, which is why I don't tweet that often, which is why I don't post that often, because I'm busy doing other things. Why aren't y'all busy doing other things? Why is everyone so busy just being a consumer?
I have a real issue with stand-up comedy, period. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, I just don't ever... it's rare that I see stand-up comedy, and maybe just because I've grown up with it, cringing, like, just waiting for... when are they going to be harmful? When is the rhetoric going to be violent? When are they going to be an asshole? When are they going to say something mean about fat people? When are they going to say something mean about gay people?
Well, I think the real problem is, and this is a lot to get into in a show intro, but I mean, really, I always connect it back to the problems we're having just across the board. It's not just about stand-up comedy. Stand-up comedy always reflects the norms and the mores of the time. And so we have a huge swath of the population that only finds humor in the debasement of others. And so it actually really connects with what we're talking about today, again, quite unintentionally, is that, belittling a group of people or othering a group of people always works. And so Netflix doesn't care because they're making tons of money. Look at all the articles they've gotten off of this over the last 2 weeks, and all of the people who now are standing for this bully ultimately. But it's the same thing churches do. It's the reason we had Trump as a president. It's the reason, everything that is anything in terms of popular culture exists.
Yeah.
Because people don't want to be their higher selves. They don't want to be their best selves. They don't want to be their empathic self. They want to be the bully in high school.
Yeah. Yeah.
They want to be, what's his name from Back to the Future? Biff. They want to be Biff.
Yes. I almost said Buff.
They want to be Biff. Everybody
Yeah.
wants to be fucking Biff, and they don't want to admit it.
Yeah.
And they get to hide behind their God, or they get to hide behind their culture, or they get to hide behind whatever norm it is that they have hugged to make it okay.
Yeah.
And the real bottom line is, well, that's fine. You can have your God, you can have your culture. You're still a shitty human being.
Yeah.
So,
And what gets me is the justification of it or the excusing of it never matches what the next person's saying.
No.
And so we keep seeing over and over again, Dave's not saying he hates trans people. He's saying, or Dave's actually, or no, actually he's on your side, mother. And it's like none of it is ever compatible and it's all contradictory. And it's like they aren't even talking to each other to get their story straight.
well, they never do. It's like it's all about the QAnon people are fighting like
And
cats
it's
and
totally,
dogs.
it totally does actually relate to what we're going to talk about today because we don't even know how to, if we're going to hate gayness, we don't even know what the answer is to get rid of it or change it. And everybody's just kind of picking at it or tackling it from their own angle and none of it aligns and there's lots of contradictions and here we are.
Here we are.
All right. I renegade through and through. I renegade through and through. Oh, Lord, if you only knew. Now tell me what do I do? And if what I say is true, how could I get through to you? I don't know how to behave. I don't know how to behave. And if I don't change my ways, it might send me to my grave. But if what I say is bad, maybe we could all be saved. Welcome to Outlaws Evidence of the Unseen, exceptional stories and conversations that weave history, religion, arts, and politics into the fabric of our greater cultural narrative. I am Ray Curenton, singer, songwriter, producer.
I'm Tim Dillinger, singer, songwriter, essayist, historian, storyteller.
I'm going to put this in the beginning of the show because I feel like I've been putting it in the end. But if you like the show, be sure to subscribe and tell everyone you know to tune in as well. And if you feel so inclined, please rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. It helps more people find us. And today, I really don't know how to encapsulate the conversation in one phrase. Are we talking about ex-gays? Are we talking about gay conversion therapy? Are we just talking about the church's antagonism to queerness?
Well, yeah, I think it's important to connect this to our previous episode in many ways on Juanita Bynum, which, by the way, thank you for the incredible response to that.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Great conversations sprang from that. But it is really related in many ways to some of her rhetoric, the kinds of rhetoric she spouts about sexual purity, so to speak. And so the conversation...
And shame
and
on
shame,
the other, yeah.
yes. And so connecting that conversation to this conversation, which is a little more focused on, in a sense, I really think it's more about the reasons that reparative therapy exists in the Christian church more than anything else. I feel like that's more what we're talking about. I think that those two things connect because it really does transcend homosexuality in a sense, because it really is about their sexual phobias.
Yes. Yes. So I know we wanted to start this conversation just kind of talking about our relationship with the notion of changing one's orientation or belief that God could deliver us. Did you want to?
Well, we were talking a little bit about this last night when we were preparing for this. Up until 14, I was in my grandparents' church, which was white evangelical land, and it was very clear from that. I mean, I grew up with I think the first time I heard about AIDS on Christian television, by the way, and I had already been kind of caught having an attraction to another kid in the church as a child. And so...
What does that mean, caught having an attraction?
We were naked together, I mean, ultimately. And so...
Gotcha.
Doing what I think many kids do.
Yes.
And so I had the whole conversation. My grandfather had a whole conversation with me about boys not, the Bible verse, men not to lay with men. But ironically, my grandfather then used it as an excuse to molest me.
Yeah.
All of my languaging up to 14, I was very suspicious of all of the rhetoric because of my experience, because of what was happening. I feel like it almost made it impossible for me to believe that any of their rhetoric around homosexuality was even real.
Yeah.
It was just something they said. So I never really bought in. And so when I moved to the Black Holiness Church at 14, there was a very different thing happening there. And so I saw sexuality being, in many ways, same-gender relationships, not formally accepted, but not... there was no conversation around it.
Yeah.
Particularly in our church. And so we'd go to other churches.
Just don't ask, don't tell.
Don't ask, don't tell.
Yeah.
So we'd go to other churches and we'd hear the sermons, but we never talked about it.
Yeah.
And so that set up a very different thing for me in terms of how I might navigate my sexuality. And so what I did, though, I was very clear that if I ever talked about it, I would be expunged. And so I didn't pursue anything with anyone, and I didn't talk about my feelings. And then when I, made really my first out friend was at work, my friend from work, when I was in my late teens. And that really blew me up in a sense, because I now had a model. I had somebody that I could see that was living with their partner and had a different kind of reality. And I was trying to balance the desire for that with my desire to not lose my community. And I think the thing at 46, I realized in retrospect, is that it was really only about not losing my community. It was not about any kind of deep spiritual commitment.
Or needing to be good.
I'm realizing I didn't believe in it. When it all comes down to it, I loved the music. I loved what we experienced spiritually in the music. And to me, I'm really clear in retrospect that it never had anything to do with God for me. That was not even really on my table. It just wasn't.
Your sexuality and needing to reconcile.
Yeah, it was about keeping my friends. That was really my and keeping the music.
Yeah. And
that experience, because that was spiritual for me, but that had nothing to do with God.
Yeah.
And so I would hear, I had a god brother who horrible in the church with me. And he had been out in his prior life and then came to us and was celibate and went to a church prior to ours that was really into the deliverance thing. So he kept anointing oil by his bed. I mean, when you went into his house and went into his bedroom, he had a whole stained wall from oil because he would wake up in the night aroused and he thought demons were tormenting him. So he would grab his anointing oil and fling it at the wall. He paid a terrible price for that because at a certain point, like so many of these stories, he could no longer keep it up.
Yeah.
And he he ultimately found some form of peace with his identity and ultimately took years to reconcile his faith with, he was a true believer. He wasn't like me.
Yeah.
He was a true believer. So it was a lot more devastating for him because he really did believe. And so I had friends who went through that, and I heard the stories over and over and over. And I just thought, thank God I never took it in like that in terms of belief, but it did take me years to pursue a relationship. It took me years to have a relationship, largely because I had become so isolated. And so that was the way I paid the price, was through isolation. And, I had to deal with my, sexual abuse as a child. And so there was just a whole journey to that. In my early 20s, just before I moved to Nashville, had a white evangelical coworker. She had...
Was this at the same office with the gay friend?
Yes. Same office, different department.
Got it.
I had 2 different jobs there at different times.
Yeah.
And so I transferred to this other department, white evangelical lady. She sat next to me, my little desk partner. And she clearly smelled it on me.
Yeah.
And it opened up conversation between us. And I, at that point, didn't have a lot of qualms about talking about it with people that weren't at church or in my community. And so, again, that also speaks to this compartmentalization that you have to develop when you're existing in these worlds.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I had no qualms about talking to her about it, because what were the odds of her ever coming into my neighborhood? What were the odds of her ever coming to my church? None.
Yeah.
Our paths were never going to cross. And so as I shared my truth with her, she said to me, "Oh, my daughter, we're just really praying for her." She said, because she is living in Ybor City, which was known as a gay neighborhood in Tampa. And she said, she's living in Ybor City. She has a girlfriend, and this is just not right. And we are trying to get her into a counselor. And she said, "Have you ever considered going to a counselor?" And I hadn't. It had never even entered my framework. And so she said, you might want to consider it, just to talk through it. I was a virgin, and she knew that. And so she said, because you haven't really pursued anything, it would probably be the good moment for you to talk to somebody to figure out if this is really who you are. And she said, we don't believe it's God's way. And so there's just, some work you could do. And I was open to that in terms of talking to someone, because I was clear I had the whole sexual abuse piece that I needed to work through. So did a little Googling, found this counselor who I did not know until I got there was a Christian counselor. And so I get to this Christian counselor, and she says to me, and I was pretty much put it all out in the first visit, because I was like, I'm not trying to make this go on for months. Let's just get it all out on the table so that we know what we're dealing with. And she said, "Well, have you ever acted on these feelings?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, then there's nothing for you to really talk about." She's like, "If you never acted on it, and you've never had a relationship with a man, you've never had sex with a man, there's really nothing to talk about. You could pursue a relationship with a woman, find yourself a wife, and you'd never need to bring it up." And I never went back, because I was like, "Oh, this bitch is out to lunch." And so that was really my only experience in talking to someone formally about it. And I was in ministries, up until the point that I left Florida. The last ministry I was at was one that I thought was more liberal, more progressive. I think I shared about this in the first episode. The pastor was marrying off gay men, to women in the congregation. And I couldn't do that either. I just couldn't do it. And so when I moved to Nashville, my church experience was really short. And, the first church was a white evangelical church that at the time held those norms. And they had epiphanies afterwards and had a very different, relationship with accepting LGBT people after I left. But in my time there, that was not the case. Then the second ministry I was at had a very volatile relationship with particularly gay men. I mean, they were actively seeking to get rid of the minister of music because they'd heard that he was gay. They were doing the Marvin Winans thing of questioning people about what they knew about him and that whole thing. So when I left, I really left, at 27. I was 27. And so through all of these years, we've seen things happen, like the B. Slade thing. We've had, a gospel artist who came out. We had Vicky Beeching. We had Jennifer Knapp. All of these things have happened in the years since I left the church. And I watched them go on, and I watched the same conversations happen. And at the end of the day, it's really made me question why we feel the need as gay people, as LGBT people, to maintain a relationship with a structure that is not designed to facilitate us. Mm-hmm. And by structure, I don't mean the church. I really mean the Christian faith. Mm-hmm. And so I have, of course, witnessed the whole, gay church culture, which in many ways I understand. I understand why it exists. I am happy that it provides community for people, but I am always concerned that their deconstruction really stops in many ways with their sexuality. Mm-hmm. That if they can just reconcile that God loves them and they're gay, then that's all the work they need to do. And I really argue that, in a sense, homosexuality is our get out of jail, not free card, but it is our get out of jail card. It is our opportunity to take it all apart, to take it all apart. Why does this structure exist? And why am I unwilling to envision my life outside of it? And so all of the reparative therapy piece and the people that have come out of it, without jumping too far ahead of our conversation, is fascinating to me. Because it just, even the gay church to me just looks like another power structure. And I don't like power. So that's my synopsis and my relationship with reparative stuff. So what was your experience?
I've been trying to pinpoint, and clearly there wasn't any specific point where it was communicated to me that homosexuality was bad. Mm-hmm. 'Cause it's not like I ever had a gay bashing sermon. There just wasn't a lot of that happening. Mm-hmm. But it clearly was communicated.
Yes.
I do recall, though, seeing youth in particular being slain in the spirit. Being brought up for prayer, being, preached over and all of that. And I think, because I also feel like that wasn't explicitly stated, but I think it was implied, or just context clues for me. I became aware that, they're casting out the gay demon or something.
The passive language.
Yeah. I don't know that it was ever said, come out, you homosexual spirit. But it was clearly, that's clearly the messaging that I got from what was being performed in front of me. The deliverance
was often the code word, because back then in my era and when you were growing up, the deliverance was used specifically in our world to deal with homosexuality. If it was addiction, it was just addiction.
Right.
There wasn't deliverance from addiction. Yeah. It was just, addiction. Breaking addictions, that kind of language. So it's a very specific language.
Yeah, when you start talking about deliverance. Yes. And so, I feel like I witnessed that maybe a couple of times, maybe. And I feel like that was really my only framework for, if you're gay, if you believe in your heart and, you'll be changed, I guess. That's, it clearly wasn't thought out enough for me, clearly. And so when it became, I'm having curiosities in my early teens, we're talking 11, 12 years old, I guess I was just in denial about what those curiosities might be. It really kind of all came to a head for me probably 8th grade. And that, I guess, just coupled with feeling different from all the other kids in school, that all that stuff that, I was suicidal at that point. I just didn't fully know what I was going to do. And that's when, I guess, for me, it turned to, I guess I need to figure out how I'm going to deliver myself from this. And it wasn't something that I felt like I could safely talk to anybody about. And so I didn't. I didn't talk to anybody about it. And didn't seek out, I do feel like on some level, because I had seen at that point, little pieces on the news, and, there were people like Donnie McClurkin that were visible as ex-gay people. You saw Exodus Ministries, Exodus International. You saw those kinds of things in the press regularly. And so I was taking that stuff in. What scared me about conversion therapy, and it's, I think, partially why I never sought it out, was I think I saw there's something not right about these people when they come through this. Yes. They don't look well. Yeah. They don't seem like everything's working up there quite the same. Like there's something, like there's a light that's dimmed in them. You know, they just kind of see there's something like almost robotic or Stepford Wivesy about them. Well, their eyes, you know, everything's very like exaggerated in a way that doesn't, you know, and I just couldn't. I knew that by pursuing that, I would lose myself. I would lose who I was. Like just on some unconscious or subconscious level, I knew that. And also probably because I had experienced the few things that I had in church of watching people being, you know, hands being laid on them and the oil and all that stuff. I guess I just thought, if this isn't something that's going to happen instantaneously, then it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I guess high school for me was a huge shame cycle of feeling the attractions. And I guess for me at that time, the acting on the attractions was really just masturbating or looking at porn and feeling shame about that and feeling repentant about that and praying, you know, and you know, just going through the whole motions again of being tempted and, you know, doing it again, feeling shame and blah, 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 over and over and over again. And eventually realizing, if this is supposed to change, why hasn't it? Mm-hmm. Maybe it's not supposed to change. And from there, seeking some other possibilities for myself. Outside of pornography, I was also seeking, or began to seek, LGBT movies, television shows, something that showed what being on the other side of this might look like. Mm-hmm. And so watching Will and Grace for the first time, really watching it, because it had been on, but really actually like, because I wasn't watching that, mm-hmm. you know, letting myself watch that, watching queer movies, watching, you know, things like that helped me go, oh, there's actually a life on the other side of this. And mm-hmm. I guess for me, I'd only seen it as a death. Mm. Yeah. And so to see, oh, you can be accepting of yourself as a gay person or a bisexual person, and you can have community with other people that are like you. And it can be, and so the concept of gay identity, I guess, became a possibility for me mm-hmm. just by seeing it. Mm-hmm. The notion of changing orientation, I just knew that was something that... It didn't make sense to me that it would have to be something that would require all this tarrying and all of this years-long work.
Yeah, I wasn't doing that.
Yeah. Mm-mm. And as we see, like, it doesn't. It doesn't work.
Do you believe that the Lord tonight has set you free?
Yes, sir.
Turn around and tell those people.
Tell them.
I'm not gay no more. I am delivered. I don't like men no more. I said I like women. Women. I said women. I'm not gay. I would not date a man. I would not carry a purse. I would not put on makeup. I will love a woman.
I want to talk about, because neither of us has mentioned the Bible. And we both know why that is. But I think, they talk about the clobber verses, those 6 or 7 passages. Yeah, I think I know the answer. But how did you feel about Scripture then? And of course I know how we feel now, but...
I never cared.
You never cared.
I never cared. And this is the real... It should have been my real clue. It shows you we all have denials on different realms, mm-hmm. different levels, because had I just given myself permission to say what I felt, because I can identify what I felt. At the time, I just thought, I don't care what the Bible says. Mm-hmm. I don't care. Mm-hmm. I don't care. It was a book. Yeah. It's a book. Mm-hmm. Written by men. Mm-hmm. They were not inspired by God. Mm-hmm. And I always had that relationship with the Bible. And they would say, you need to get in your word. No, I'm not doing that. That was always me. No, I'm not doing that. Because if we are clinging to the Bible, I always went back to the verse about us being living epistles. And I thought that means it's not all contained here. And we cannot live, and I never believed this. I never believed that we should hold ourselves under the light of a book that was written thousands of years ago in a completely different context, in a completely different world, all kinds of different norms. It just never made sense to me. And I just thought, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not reading it. I'm not thinking about it. I'm not meditating on it day and night. I'm just not. And so when people would quote the Bible, I just like, and that's not how I feel. And that's not my reality. So, and what?
Yeah.
You want to go back in time? Go back in time. I'm not. I'm here now. So that's why none of it really worked for me in terms of how they discussed it, because it wasn't intellectual.
Gotcha. And I guess for me, I think there were enough notions of Bible study as something that might be intellectual that, you know, I was raised up to believe in that whole biblical inerrancy thing. And I think, unlike you, I also the sexuality stuff for me was about being good. It was about being, you know, closer to God and, you know, doing what God wants me to do and be obedient to God and, you know, and all that. And so that was a piece of the struggle for me. It wasn't until I realized my struggle with the sexuality stuff, I guess as much like as we were talking about in the Juanita Bynum episode, like there's really not anything about how to navigate the world as a single person and dating. Like, I guess as I started looking at those specific scriptures, it wasn't enough for me. Like there wasn't enough in there to tell me one way or the other what to do with it. So, you know, just men giving themselves over to, you know, desires, you know, like, okay, so we've described that as something that's maybe not good. Now what?
Right.
And so again, if it's not a good thing, what's the answer? What's the pathway to right. If that's what the Bible says, if that's the way to interpret that scripture, what's the pathway to quote unquote righteousness?
Well, and I also have to say too, I mean, I particularly when I got to the Holiness Church, which is hysterical, but our pastor, I've always had to shout him out because I did not appreciate him when he was alive, when I was there. I did not appreciate a lot of the passive things he did that were really giving us messages because he was willing to confront our denomination on women. He was willing to confront our denomination on makeup and jewelry and, you know, women's head coverings. And he was willing to transgress all of that. And that also modeled for me, and probably he was the only person I'd ever seen in church power structure who did this, that said, yeah, not everything's going to be answered by the Bible. Some things we're going to change just because we want to change them. And so that also gave a lot of room for me in terms of thinking about what people were willing to change and what they weren't. And he never talked, I never heard him say one word about homosexuality ever.
Yeah.
Other than the man who came and threw up in the middle of the service and said God had just healed him from AIDS. And our pastor said, no, he didn't. And beyond that, like, we never heard or saw anything that which also is a really interesting thing. Like, his relationship to the supernatural was also very practical. Like, and so I laugh about it, and it's not really funny, but it was in the moment.
Because he didn't. Like, he didn't.
Yeah, he didn't. And so I always loved him for not being so heavenly minded that he was no earthly good. Like, I really appreciate that so much more now than I did at the time. And I did see it at the time, but I didn't fully get it.
Yeah. And I think it probably being in other places where preachers weren't like that, I'm sure helped you get a greater appreciation for that.
I mean, actually, I'm kind of tearing up thinking about it because he really that was life-changing. Yeah. It was life-changing to say, some things you're just not going to find in the Bible. And so also, I just wanted to add, my relationship with that was also shaped by that. And, that's not how fundamentalism thinks, and that's why the reparative therapy, really is so much about getting people in a bubble and convincing them that bubble is their only world. And their only way of speaking is the language of that bubble.
Yes.
Their only way of being is the norms of that bubble. And so they're suffocating people ultimately into submission.
And we've talked about this notion of deliverance. Is it through exorcism? Is it through prayer? Is it through therapy? Confessional?
When I was growing up, it's the only generation I can really speak of because things have changed significantly. And I was in both the white church and the black church at different periods. So the white church was very much about behavior modification.
Yeah.
And process, and so this formal, classes, Exodus, I know we'll talk about that kind of thing.
Yes.
Was the norm in white evangelicalism. And my experience in the black church was that it was more about instantaneous, God's gonna do it, and you'd have that tarrying moment and you just healed and go get married.
Yeah.
And it was more about performative. They were looking for, in the black church, they were looking for performative yet instantaneous changes, like mannerisms, gender performance.
Yeah.
It was ultimately about, can you give me
Butch realness.
I was trying to not say it. I swear to God, I was trying to not say Butch Queen. Yes. It was about that. It was about those kinds of transformative changes that happened instantaneously, and that's your testimony.
Yeah.
Which
makes, as we say that, it actually makes what the kids were doing in ballroom all the more, why don't we throw this word around a lot? But that's actually empowering a little bit to see them just go, well, fuck that in the church setting, but sure, I'll play around with the other kids, in the club.
But I've also got to say, the end of, my era in the church was, particularly in the late 90s, Donnie McClurkin really emerged. And that he really single-handedly changed a lot of the conversations in the black church around homosexuality, which did not help at all. And so he became this model, for men, because then men felt a little more comfortable saying they were struggling. I heard a lot more conversation about that after Donnie McClurkin.
In my mind, it just wasn't really talked about before that.
No.
Yeah, again, don't ask, don't tell. And if I end up never married, we're just not going to discuss it.
Right.
Yeah. And so the fact that he felt the need to make that a part of his testimony and ministry and write a whole book about it.
Yep.
What was it?
And a film.
Internal victim, something.
Something about victim and victor.
Victims and victors, yeah.
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 I always thought he was dangerous and harmful and a bit unhinged. And I think he's kind of proven to be.
Yeah.
And so, but that really did change the conversation in many ways within the church. I don't think it changed much for people outside of the church, but I know that it changed the way it was approached in the church. And in a sense, it really brought more homophobia to the surface than I remember seeing as a teenager in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. I don't remember seeing the level of homophobia that emerged in the late 90s. But I also think that part of that has to do with this whole notion of one church. And then the ways white evangelicalism, we really can obviously see how it started informing things that were happening in the black church. And I know that if we watched the PBS special, we would never get the impression that ever happened. But it really did happen. And I think everything we've seen really since the late 90s within the black church really shows the influence of white evangelicalism, particularly as it pertains to this conversation.
Yeah, the approach and what to do about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the tolerance.
Yes.
The intolerance of it. To me, it was a 180.
Yeah. Yeah. And we also, I mean, all of that was happening at around the time of, okay, so the Matthew Shepard thing happened. Then we've got, like, 4 years later, we've got gay marriage in Massachusetts.
Right.
You know, and so the marriage conversation, I think, also
Yes.
scared people.
Yes.
And I think it was I think for them subconsciously it's we lose our ability to control this, then we lose them.
Yes. Well, can I also...
Yeah.
I feel like this is probably a good moment to say that we're also... Well, there was Donnie McClurkin happening in the black church. In the white world, we had Jennifer Knapp. We had Vicky Beeching. Ray Boltz. 3 big CCM people who all came out at different times, but it was within the span of a decade or so. And really what that showed... I mean, these were 3 big... artists. They were major artists in that world, and they literally came out and it was just like dropped without a blink.
Disappear.
There was not a moment of mourning over it or outrage or, oh, but I still love their music. No, baby, they were dropped. And so that also sent a powerful message to anyone else on the inside that might have been considering coming out, to how quickly their career could end. I mean, in a sense, we really saw that on the gospel side with Tone, you know, with B. Slade. When he came out, just over. And within that world. And to me, there is not a lot of humanity in that. And so I think that's the other thing that really gets communicated through the reparative therapy conversations, and why perhaps the people who really hold on through that kind of thing do is because they know they will be cast out. If they fail.
Yeah. And wanting to kind of dig in on this conversation, we watched a few films.
We did.
One of which is a short film. It's on Amazon Prime. It's called Abomination, Homosexuality and the Ex-Gay Movement. Came out in 2006. So fairly older in terms of, you know, this is pre-Obama. This is pre-marriage equality. Pre even Exodus ending, homosexuality as a struggle.
Yes.
You know, when they try to compare homosexuality to like murder or lying and cheating, like those aren't things you struggle with. They're just actions, you know?
Right.
And position that with this notion of, we heard, and we hear it in all these documentaries, we of course probably experienced it at some point ourselves or watched other people in our, you know, church life experience. I want to change, or I've changed, on the flip side, the change. And I guess when I think about the struggle and this change, again, it's very complex to me, because is the struggle the feelings, the attractions? Is the struggle the doing of things? Is it?
Well, it's 2 different things. I think it's actually a conflicting notion in the first place, because I think the struggle is about the feelings. The change is in the performance.
Right.
Which is actually it's a little crazy.
Right.
I mean, I see why it makes people buckle, because it's not reconciled. There's no reconciliation in that between the 2 things. And so it is also why, though, we see so many ministries run with all of these secrets. Because ultimately all that really matters is what is seen.
Right.
Or known.
Right.
What becomes known.
Right.
And
the ultimate goal of being ex-gay is when you can look me in the eye and say you no longer struggle with the feelings. You don't even have homosexual desires anymore. And who gonna check you, boo? Like, you know, I can't get behind your, you know, your eyes or, you know, whatever. And I mean, other than hooking people up to lie detector tests, which could actually be kind of fun. I feel like the whole how we got here in the church, you know, just how we got here, I feel like all of that is lies built on top of lies that have been systemically upheld. And so you've got, in the 70s, the APA changing their stance. And instead of saying, homosexuality is this deviant thing, it's an impairment, now they're saying it's not a deviance, it's not an impairment. There's no lessening of quality of life by being gay. Mm-hmm. That ultimately, the church's response to that being to clamp down further.
Well, I mean, I think that nobody's really making the connection to, even in COVID, I think that this is part of the reason the church so distrusts science, and always has, since they've started, reversing a lot of the alignment they once had with the Christian right. Mm-hmm. It's why the church completely distrusts science in every way. And we're really not connecting like COVID response to homosexuality as a disorder. Mm-hmm. And the reversal of that, and evolution. There's like a history of science breaking, in a sense, with Christian values and Christian beliefs that they're still angry about.
They talk also about the performance training stuff, like you were saying, the how to sit, the how to talk,
yes,
how to dress for women. It's like putting on makeup. They also talked about a lot of non-sexual physical contact with the same sex. So there were like all these images of like men hugging, or like the sessions where they were like laying down next to men, but it wasn't sexual.
Mm-hmm. That I'd never heard of or seen anything like that before. That was fascinating to me.
Yeah. Then on the flip side, you get the more explicitly violent things like the electrotherapy, and they talked about like the electrodes leaving burns on the arms, which, I mean, it's just horrific stuff. And to think this isn't just happening to adults, which is already abhorrent, but the fact that they're doing this to children too, or were doing this to children. I thought the pillow smacking thing was interesting. Them taking the tennis rackets and smacking the pillows.
About that. Yes.
Saying, Dad, Dad, Mom. Again, just antiquated across the board. And I appreciate the film talking about just the revolving leadership in these organizations.
Yes.
No one can ever stay.
Yep.
Which shows you that there's some kind of problem. Either they're scandalized at some point, or they eventually recant and they're out now.
Right.
Yeah, so you talked about the church that you were at, marrying off these men.
Yeah.
And so these men were having sex with, and children with women, even though they weren't allured or attracted to them. Right. And it's interesting that in and of itself was, which I guess that just is the end game when it comes to being ex-gay.
Yes.
It's at the end of the day, I'm going to be normal and get married and have kids.
Well, and I feel like I have to say they are all divorced now. I think that's important to say, so it's not just me throwing around this, experience. No, they are all divorced now. The men are all in relationships with men now. And so that's the reality that I think most of these ex-gay ministries don't want you to know. They don't want these people. I mean, I wonder, because they didn't talk about this, and the parents didn't talk about this in the documentaries that we watched. Were they asking about success rate? Or did they just take it for granted that it was going to succeed because God? And
well, what they did was they had these fake studies.
And the testimonials.
Well, the testimonials, but also these fake studies where they did allegedly reach out to people and claimed success because of how they were asking the questions.
Right.
And then it became a shift. It became even more convoluted because then the shift went from change. You're going to be changed to, because there was a lack of success around, if we're defining change as, and therefore now I'm attracted to the opposite sex, it's just lifelong celibacy.
Right.
So if these people aren't, again, acting on their sexuality, is that enough of a success? Because at least they're not doing it.
Right.
And so I think that's how I don't think the parents were looking into it too well. And if they had the questions, they had their bullshit studies to make them feel better about it. One thing that I did find very interesting in this documentary is they talked a little bit about the suppression of the desires, making the notion of sex and acting on having sex more titillating because I, can't do it, but I want to do it. It makes it therefore more clandestine and more risky. And their desire to act out on it becomes more extreme and erratic. And in some cases, non-consensual.
Well, and see, the church would have us to believe that that is what homosexuality is.
They would have you believe that that's the ultimate incarnation of lust.
Yes. And what they don't choose to be honest about is that they are the ones that actually create that pathology for people by scandalizing and demonizing homosexuality. And so, that has always been...
It's self-fulfilling.
Totally.
Yeah.
They create it every single second of it.
Yeah.
And they love it.
Yeah. And Juanita kind of said it.
She did.
And, when we were talking about her in the last episode, like, I'm not going, go to the altar and confess over some, just masturbating or whatever. I want to have all the sex first, and then I'll repent about it.
Yeah.
And it's this idea that if sex of any kind is a temptation, then any kind of sex or sex act is going to be bad. I thought it was also telling in that documentary. They said that all of the conversion therapy people who now identify as heterosexual are the people that are leadership in those ministries.
Well, which, I kind of alluded to earlier, like the power structure aspect of it, that I think is ultimately what all of these groups are about. It's about, the hierarchy. So I'm not just going to be a recovering gay. I'm going to be the recovering gay in charge. And, then it becomes an economic stream. And so then they become power players because they become politically involved. And we don't interrogate that, which is why I find, even, LGBTQI ministers, I find the power structure of the gay church problematic. Because now you are brokering in Washington as well. And so I just find, all of it a bit abhorrent.
And I would probably be willing to take it a little bit more from the ex-gays. If there were examples of just everyday people who aren't in leadership, who aren't needing to be on a platform, who aren't needing to minister and ultimately crusade around this, where are just the normal ex-gay people just living their ex-gay lives? We don't see that a lot.
No.
I think the idea of homosexuality as a choice is really interesting. And I know both of us have had evolving thoughts about what that means. And I think because, again, when you say homosexuality, what aspects of it? Are we talking about attraction? Are we talking about behavior? Are we talking about identity?
Right.
And I guess for me, the grand question should be, if we were, and I know these, none of these notions or conversations or questions exist in a vacuum. And so I'm clear, like, we're living in a society that is lording power over us all the time to be a particular way and to live a particular way. But in a perfect world, quote unquote, does it matter if it's a choice?
Well, yes. Well, I had, when I came out, I did the Born This Way stuff. I did it. And I love the song. Love Carl Bean and that song and the pioneering work that it did. I appreciate it. But as I continued having conversations over like my first decade of outness, I found myself exhausted with saying it and with hearing people say it.
Yeah.
And which then made me take it apart because, I'm not a good joiner.
Yeah.
And so as I started taking it apart, I thought, why? Why does it matter? Why can I not, as a human being, simply say, maybe I did choose this? And why do I not have the autonomy as a human being to choose who I love? Why is that wrong? Why do I have to be born this way to try and make you feel some kind of way about it? And I thought about, as you and I both fell into lesbian feminism and understanding lesbian feminism, not just as an orientation, but as a political identity. And the number of women who were in heterosexual relationships that were embracing lesbian feminism and choosing then lesbian relationships and having dialogue about that. And that really shifted me in terms of how I related to my own sexuality. And so I really did start in conversations with people challenging, why would it not be permissible for me to choose this?
Right.
Why would that not be okay? Why does it have to be something that is genetic or DNA driven to plead my case with you?
Yeah.
Why am I not strong enough emotionally or intellectually to make my own choices? Which then completely opens up a whole different conversation. And some people are really offended by that. Some gay people are really offended by the notion of that discussion. But for me, it's the one we have to have. Because the thing I think we noticed in the documentaries was the infantilization of everyone, the parents and the children. They were all infants looking to be told what to believe and waiting to be told what to believe and needing to be accepted. And the comment in Pray Away.
We haven't even gotten to that.
And we haven't even gotten to that yet. But there was a moment where one of the ex-gay leaders gets caught in a gay bar, and his wife, who was also an ex-gay, said to him, why can't you just obey? And I thought, well, there it is. That's the whole problem. That's the whole problem. They're all children needing to obey rather than being adults in control of their decisions, which is my ultimate problem with faith structure. When you tell people they're sheep, when you tell people, they're children, Lord, teach us, that's the whole problem. What's your relationship with choice versus born this way? Or how have your values changed or beliefs changed around that?
I wrote a whole album
You did.
about this experience. How many albums called Backslider? A few of the songs deal very head-on with the grapplings of sexuality and decisions that are ultimately made. And I guess for me, that's the piece of the pie. Like, whether or not the attractions that I have in me are innate, which on a level, yes, I do think that's at play. But I also do go, again, like, we don't live in a vacuum. We receive messages and images and advertisements and are coerced into, seeing the world in a particular way, seeing bodies in a particular way. And so I'm clear that all these things are working. And so, laying all that aside, the choices to me are about, what are you going to do with that? And I think identity is something that's absolutely a choice. And so, my song Abomination, it's really about making that choice to not identify with the church's understanding, the conservative church's understanding of what being homosexual is, and instead choosing to identify as, whatever you want to identify as, and being okay with that. I wrote another song, Honesty, that's just about, again, whether or not whatever piece of this is a choice, it is who I am. It is who I am. Whether I chose to be who I am or whether I was born this way, it's who I am. So what are we doing with that? Well, we got to get honest about that first. I think there can be some freedom in the breaking down of things around, attraction versus romantic desire versus, doing all of that. But I also feel like a lot of that compartmentalizing is exactly that, compartmentalizing. And it can become super duper unhealthy when it's, well, I'm going to take that piece, but not that piece.
Yep.
And I'm going to say I'm struggling with this, but I'm not going to act on it. I'm gonna, toxic. Mm-hmm. Those decisions, the choices, are they a result of, well, first off, is it? Then I'm going to flip it and say, how much of it is a choice? How much of the choosing to go to reparative therapy, choosing to say, I'm ex-gay now, or I'm, whatever, or even choosing to frame your relationship with your sexuality as a struggle. Mm-hmm. If it's coercion, is that really a choice?
Right.
If you feel compelled to go to therapy or to be abstinent or to not talk about it for fear of losing your community, for fear of losing your family, is that really a choice? It's made under duress.
Yep. It has saddened me through the years, but particularly saddened me as we watch these documentaries, was the whole work of fighting to make God in our image. And that's on both ends, because you've got the Christians that are telling you, the right-wing Christians, I should say, telling you God doesn't approve of your life. This isn't God's best. And then you have gay Christians on the other side. God loves you exactly like you are. And I'm like, well, this is a lot of rhetoric to me that in the big picture doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Can you accept you? Right. And that's what I don't feel like anybody's really doing. Like all of this speaking for God, who really is made in our image, no matter who we are. We make God to be what we want him to be. Like, I love that Reba Rambo song, He Can Be What You Want Him to Be. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, that's true. And so why can we not just step away and say, you know what? If I need to have a relationship with God, a God entity, I'm fine.
Well, the problem is when you're a white supremacist, then who God is for you is a white supremacist,
yep.
Which means your God
yep.
has to genocide everybody else so that you get to have your white supremacy. Yep. That's when it becomes a danger to others.
Well, and I would argue, though, that that's the whole danger in any of it.
Yes.
I mean, and that's because what I really see are many people, gay people, claiming God, but not decrying all of these other values as well. And there are many gay Christians that are doing their work around racism and all that. So that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is there are many who would be content to just be accepted as a gay Christian with the right wingers, and not go any further. And so that's my whole kerfuffle.
I think in talking about this choice versus coercion stuff, I think it's why I go to white supremacy. Mm-hmm. Because to me, I absolutely see, especially when you start digging into histories of sexuality and the condemnation of sexuality in othered people, sexual orientation and gender identity as a caste system, to me.
Yes.
I see that played out. And it's why, the policing of sexuality.
Yes.
And even the queer navigating of that in the church. And it's why I've understood people, gay people, LGBT people who have had resistance to marriage equality as the thing, because it is a furthering of trying to fold in certain queer people and ultimately make them not queer at the expense of all the other things that are still issues that create the caste system.
Yes.
And so, now gays can marry, but there are still going to be all these others.
Yes.
That don't have rights. That don't have quality of life, that are being killed, that are,
I mean, and that's exactly right. I mean, we have the example of many in the gay community that will not affirm trans people.
Yeah.
And are willing to watch them die, willing to contribute rhetoric that excuses that and makes that possible.
Partner with conservative, this whole LGB alliance thing that's happening in the UK, and Boris Johnson has affirmed them, and I'm just like, if you need any other proof that what you're doing is probably abhorrent, to me it all goes back to lack of empathy.
it goes back to that, only being concerned with your acceptance in the herd and not really being concerned about what happens beyond your acceptance.
Yeah.
And not being, and ultimately our journey of becoming, not to sound like an Oprah book, but, ultimately our becoming is continuous. And so it's like the piece of accepting ourselves is only the first step. It then becomes about, okay, who am I not accepting? What am I not accepting? Continuing that path, because you're going to continue to discover more about yourself in that process.
I don't know. I'm trying to bring it back to the Donnie McClurkin thing. And it's just so interesting that, I guess, as long as he's not, quote unquote, doing it, he remains in good favor. We don't know if he's still struggling. That appears to not really matter, though, for those church people that have platformed him. And
absolutely not.
Yeah, it really is just about the act piece of it, the lifestyle.
And repeating the rhetoric. Repeating the rhetoric is really all that matters.
And on the flip side, you've got now, which I never had seen before, queer people empathizing with him. And on a level feeling sorry for him, because he recently did an interview, was on TV One, and he talked about continually having failed relationships and being at the point now where he feels like he's done. He's just going to be single for the rest of his life.
Most likely.
And people finding that sad. And yes, on a level it is sad, but
here's where my empathy tank is empty.
Yeah.
You don't have it. Sorry. Once you cross the threshold for me of ultimately receiving economic compensation for repeating the rhetoric, I don't have a lot of empathy for whatever happens after.
Yeah.
I don't. So that's his choice. He chose God's best. And if that's what he believes God's best is for him, then I have to love that for him. Enjoy it, boo. He chose that lifestyle. I didn't.
Yeah. We talked about this whole biblical literalism, biblical inerrancy. How much of that is still such a pick and choose? When we think about all the things that the Bible does say to do that people don't do. Particularly as it relates to like poor people and wealth. It doesn't matter to people that believe in this literalism that, when, scholars have looked at the Greek and Hebrew and it's like actually the word abomination really just meant like against tradition or against ritual. Actually, when we were, looking at the word natural and natural really just meant like customary, uncustomary. Like for them, it doesn't matter because they're going to continue to pick and choose what things they're going to give greater weight.
Yes.
What things they're just going to completely ignore. Yeah. So, Pray Away.
Oh boy.
New documentary on Netflix.
Yeah.
Produced by Ryan Murphy, who creator of shows like Nip Tuck, Glee, Pose, American Horror Story, Hollywood. Let's talk about it. I've seen critics and reviews calling it like the definitive film on reparative therapy.
Probably. I mean, in many ways, yes. In many ways, yes. On one hand, I really appreciate that it really shows us the people that were at the helm of many of... Because it was multiple ministries they showed us. And so I appreciate us getting to see the people who were putting it together, leading, so to speak. On some level, the pretty early recognition that they were deceiving people.
Well, yeah, like, oh goodness, how do you say his name? Is it Michael Bussey?
Sure.
I mean, he had left in, was it the 70s?
I believe so.
He said he couldn't continue to pretend that the people he was quote unquote helping were changing.
Yes.
And so he had that realization early on before Exodus even really took off.
Right.
I really enjoyed the image of the early Exodus promo poster that just said at the top, the headline, "Unhappy and Gay." And I mean, again, like,
How could you not be?
how could you not?
Sorry.
That's exactly what I was going to
Sorry.
say. How could you not
Sorry.
be? How could you not be?
Sorry.
Like, up until a certain point, it wasn't even fucking legal.
Right.
And then after that, you're dealing with, on all sides, everyone abhorring you.
Yeah. Threats of death, the possibility of death,
Oh, now AIDS.
harassment,
Oh,
unemployment, being fired,
Yeah.
losing housing, and then yes, AIDS.
Yeah.
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 Fun.
And so, yeah, of course. And so to connect the unhappiness to a lacking of a spiritual life, or that the lifestyle of being gay, being incompatible with happiness, just by very nature, because spiritually it's not in alignment.
Right.
Misses all of that. And it's very convenient for someone who doesn't want to think too far into
Absolutely.
it, or explore, or see the world in systems, see the world
Absolutely.
in power dynamics. And that's what they're banking on. That's what this entire industry,
Yeah, I was going to say economy. Yes.
the economy,
Exactly.
yes, it's an industrial complex. That's what it's built on.
Yes. I had a large criticism of the film from that standpoint, because in looking at the power structure, what I couldn't help but notice was that all of these people managed to hold on to a platform in changing their beliefs. They now have a platform on the other side of the spectrum. And that bothered me. And I'm not saying these people should be canceled. That's not what I'm not saying these people should just be run out of the world. But I am saying that for them, because what I also observed in the film is that these people seem to be economically well off. That's the appearance I got. Beautiful homes, lavish wedding that was happening for the one couple. It just seemed a bit like their lives were ultimately unaffected.
Well, and we're talking about like former chairmen of the board, former presidents. These people were in leadership for years. And that's, not even taking into account, like, they're white Christians. Like, they probably came from a certain amount of affluence to start with.
Yes.
Especially given the fact that they were, as was said many times, I was articulate, and therefore they put me in front because I could, talk about these things as someone who, this was my story. I wasn't just some straight person saying, hey, gay people can change. I was saying I've struggled with these things, and I could do it in an articulate way. And so I think that does imply that they were, they had a certain education, they had a certain upbringing. And so, yeah, of course they're well off after they decide, oh, I don't want to do this anymore.
And so I just thought to myself, like, I appreciate wanting to be on the right side of things at the end of the story. So I don't want to sound like I'm saying they should not be saying the things they're saying. What I am saying is some part of me just wanted to know, like, do you just have a regular job now?
Right.
Is this platform your full-time thing? Because I really would have a problem with that.
Well, two things. One, you said it in the I think it was our first episode. You talked about how church people aren't prepared by the church to do anything else.
Yes.
And so I think that's one thing. The other thing is we had multiple people in that film say. One was Yvette Cantu Schneider. She talked about, quote, this is a quote from her, "The leaders are the special ones. I have to perform to be a part of this special group."
Yes.
And she recognized that early on when she was, because she joined the church later in life. I think she said she was like 27. And then you also had Julie Rogers, who was one of the younger ones. She came into the ministry at like 16. And she was seeing the ex-gay leaders speaking at conferences. And she said, I want to be like them.
Yes.
I want to be cool and happy and loved by God.
Yes.
And so you've got multiple leaders of this movement being attracted to leadership.
Yes. She bothered me the most. She bothered me the most. And I had the least empathy for her.
Really?
Yeah.
Even though she was the youngest?
Yeah. Because I just felt like more so for what it appears it is now, that she didn't just step away. And that, honestly, had Exodus not fallen apart, would she have even left?
Well, that's how I felt about all of them. It does seem like none of them really ever, except for Michael, who left early on.
Yes.
It doesn't seem like any of them really chose to leave it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was like post Prop 8, things just became more difficult for them. And then post marriage equality, or,
And yes, you were having panic attacks, but you still weren't making a move to leave on your own.
Right.
So I'm sorry you were having panic attacks, but, you could have been making a plan.
So none of the choices, choices.
Yeah, choices.
Really, to me, seemed like choices that were a response to any reflection.
No.
It was just like things were happening, and I couldn't continue to do what I was doing the way I liked doing it.
I honestly, as I was listening to a lot of the their wrap up stories, I thought, how much of this is church people story spinning? To be on the right side of it now, and to feel, to try to set it up like you were thinking it the whole time, but were you?
Yeah.
Because I just think about times I have been in those situations and I pulled away, you pull away. It's what you do.
You get introspective.
You don't wait until, you're on 2020 and you see yourself looking like an asshole because you're on what'd she say? I felt like I was on the wrong side of the table.
Yeah.
But you didn't think that before then with your panic attacks. So, I had a hard time. And to see the lack of criticism from particularly evangelicals about that has been disappointing to me. I just saw a lot of, getting my life watching this, and oh my God, it's my story. And I'm just like, really? It's your story?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even Randy Thomas, he was the former Exodus president, and he talked about the mutually beneficial arrangement of collaborating with the pseudoscientists, and then eventually talking about collaborating with the right wing, collaborating with Republicans in the Bush administration, to give themselves credibility after the APA stopped considering homosexuality a disorder, and then pushing for anti-gay legislation, fighting marriage equality. And when it's all said and done, he comes out. Mm-hmm. A gay person asks him, "What do you think about the blood on your hands?" And he just said he was afraid to look at them.
Yeah. I had nothing.
And he at least said he doesn't think he deserves forgiveness. But what does, if you want to talk reparative therapy, what does reparations look like when you've done this much harm to youth, to...
700,000 people in the United States alone was the statistic at the end of the movie that they believe have gone through reparative therapy, some form. 700,000 people.
All of the suicides, all of the just long-term just baggage and mental health stuff that results from this. Not to mention, what it means to collaborate with the GOP.
Yep.
What it means to give credence to fake scientists.
And to not really grapple with the larger effects of what those relationships have done. Because this is not just about gay people. At the end of the day, gay people were a part of a major platform. Mm-hmm. Or I shouldn't say gay people. The homosexual aspect of this story.
Fighting the gay agenda.
Yes. Has connected to a much broader...
Fighting abortion.
Yes.
Fighting, it's all those things.
It's how we got Trump in office, ultimately.
Yeah.
And so it's these people are responsible for not just the damage to LGBT people. Mm-hmm. It's much larger. And so I just feel like they just got pats on the back a little too quick.
Yeah. After multiple years being in this.
Yeah.
For some of them decades.
And I want to know how much money they made. I want to know how much money they made doing what they did for all of those years.
Yeah. Well, we'll never know because, they don't have to file 990s, these religious organizations.
Right.
So, yeah.
So that was my real gripe with Pray Away. And I guess on that level, they did their job really well because they presented this information and it gave me the space to critically think and ask those questions. But I don't see enough people asking those questions about the people that were in this film. And again, I'm not saying that they should be, hunted down and harmed in any way. I'm just saying, like, I really question the migration of platform.
Yeah.
And how much do they make now? Are they still making money on this as, now allies in finger quotes? Like, is this a source of income? I'm curious.
And I think the piece that I feel like I'm ultimately saying, you're ultimately saying, is as we reimagine what having faith-based community might be for LGBT people, why does it involve needing leaders?
Yes.
Why does it involve needing spokespeople? Why does it involve having role models?
Yep. I'm deeply concerned by the number of former youth pastors, former worship leaders, former whatevers in the church that are now evangelicals that have figured out how to create a new economic stream, as life coaches or virtual pastors is one I saw now. Like, you don't need to go to church. Like, I'll be your virtual pastor. And I'm just like, why is this the way, A, people need things, and B, the way people earn a living? It's bizarre to me because I don't want to be shit for you.
Right.
I'm going to say what I need to say, but guess what? I have a job and I have interests and I go on about my business, but I'm not trying to be responsible for you, boo. And that people have figured out how to monetize this as a way of living, even in emancipating in so many other ways.
Right.
But it doesn't then extend to problematizing the model that they learned in the church. And so I really just,
Why do we continue to need that same setup?
Yes.
That same power relationship?
Yes.
That same dependency?
Yep. That still ultimately requires some level of me having language like you. That on some level still requires me having some modicum of belief that mirrors yours. And that we all have this one thing we are connected through. And which is really interesting because here we are trying to create community, but we don't know what that means or what that looks like. And we've said that since day one.
And it certainly doesn't mean we need to be the voice of it.
No, or the new face.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw someone on Twitter, I think it was last week, someone had said something like, oh, my life changed and my purpose was, just completely was reinvigorated when I realized I needed to be the person that my younger self needed to see. Mm-hmm. And I used to, on a level, because that's that Oprah shit. And so I used to base my artistry or my sense of purpose in this world around that. And I realized it didn't really get me anywhere. I was too busy being me. I was too busy just trying to be the me I needed to be. To be okay with me. Mm-hmm. And to survive. And to find peace and joy. And it's ever evolving. And I'm still doing that work. And I think, yeah, sure, there are some templates along the way. You see people do things and they inspire you. A lot of those people, for me, especially lately, have been people who aren't here anymore. People that have done things decades ago.
That's right.
That now feel really revolutionary for when they were doing them.
That's right. Considering
how much more difficult that must have been or what the cost must have been. I guess I just feel like the we's we need to see. Mm-hmm. I think it's a way to... our individual needs, our individual paths are on some level a bit too individual. Mm-hmm. For there to be one person that we need to look at as the person we need to be. Mm-hmm. Or model ourselves after. And it's also not realistic.
No.
so much of the splintering in Christianity has in part been about the fact that we can't ever agree. And we're too busy defining ourselves as what we aren't.
Yes.
And not what we are. We just have to continue to create denominations and sectors and branch off and make small, different churches. If we're just defining ourselves as what we aren't.
Yep.
When is the coming together to create what we are, what we want things to be?
Yes. When I left the church, ultimately, there wasn't a bank of community. When I left, there was we didn't even have Twitter when I left. That wasn't even a thing yet. And so there was just no connection outside of myself. And so it was freeing, because in leaving, I finally get to just explore what I want to explore. And so I read books on Buddhism, and I read books on, other faiths, and I read poetry and, paganism and all kinds of work. It gave me freedom because I didn't have to fit in any shell anymore. Mm-hmm. And what I feel like ultimately is going to happen with the evangelicals is it's going to flush out. And people are either going to go back, as we're in some senses seeing people doing. Mm-hmm. We're seeing some of the evangelicals already make negotiations to return to the church in the form of worship leaders. So there's going to be a new negotiation they'll make with the structure, because they'll realize, I'm not cut out to be in the world. I don't have the tools, as we said earlier. Mm-hmm. Or they will set themselves completely free and be willing to figure out how to make peace with the past of their life as an evangelical and figure out a new path. But the modeling is, to me, I just see a bunch of clones right now. And so I'm not seeing a lot of lessons being learned from where they came from.
Yeah. Well, we always like to end these episodes talking about what the outlaw version would look like. I don't know if we're talking about the people in the documentaries, the families, or the XX gays, or if we're just talking about the journey of reconciling faith and sexuality.
Well, the outlaw version, to me, if there was ever a model, if there was a model of a person, it was my own, was Leslie Phillips, who just simply left the economic model behind and went on to do something completely different.
She's not gay, though.
And she's not gay. But there was an evangelical connection to the stream from youth. And so that's why I make that connection. It's to the model. There was a marriage to the model, in a sense. And in coming out of that model, she just went on. And I really would wish that for people who leave, to particularly it's kind of complicated, the XX gays.
XX gays.
Yeah, that's a whole mouthful. Mm-hmm. Is that they'd be able to find peace with themselves and, life outside of that kind of community, which is hard to do when it's all you are accustomed to. It's like, you do think you can move on and find, some other form of community that's rooted in who you really are. But I would really hope for ultimate individuality, if that's even a real thing. Mm-hmm. I would hope that they could find that.
Well, and I think it's both at the same time, which probably sounds contradictory, but I do think it is seeking out a path that is absolutely your own, mm-hmm. but at the same time not being individualistic to the point that you're accountable to no one. Mm. And when I think about community, or what faith-based community, I think about what we're trying to create, in part with this podcast. It's figuring out how to, from the base up, without leaders, without spokespeople, mm-hmm. without influencers, come together and support each other. Mm-hmm. Just meet needs. I think this whole, I think that's why the what makes the whole Exodus stuff, that whole reparative therapy stuff, so insidious, is all the focus on youth, mm-hmm. all the focus on the children, mm-hmm. and trying to correct course, but ultimately it's about indoctrinating and funneling them into ministry or leadership. And so, yeah, I think the outlaw version of these XX gays is not needing to be a fucking leader.
Yeah.
And doing good in the world, not seeing it as something that needs to be so grand.
Well, it made me think about, in one of my women's studies courses, our teacher really snubbing her nose up at the idea of individual action having any impact on changing the world. And, in her mind, it really was about, being in power, being in leadership, and being, in position to be a change maker. And, I really challenged that, because I was like, I actually think the greater change is the individual. Because A, it's harder. It's harder. And B, it requires a different kind of commitment.
And if we could all be leaders, then none of us are leaders. So how does that work at scale?
Yeah.
If we're really going to try to change, it's just it's a clusterfuck.
And so I really like that idea of people really taking charge of their individual lives and making those small changes and saying, no, I will not lead. No, I will not be in charge of others. I will not, be a boss. And my way is not the only way.
And seeing your individual actions and decisions, not through the lens of, because again, when church community is always defined by control. Individualism is dangerous when you aren't, again, seeing yourself as accountable to how you might be harmful.
Well, you always have to see yourself as part of the whole.
Right.
I mean, being an individual and having individuality does not mean you think you are the universe.
Right.
It just means you are cognizant that you are a part of a greater world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, when we aren't taught to hold two thoughts at the same time.
Yeah. It then means I have to be a sheep.
Yeah.
Or I have to control everything.
Yeah.
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 Instead of, I'm just a piece of it.
Yeah.
Is that the end?
We covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, this is gonna suck to edit. All right.
Where can they find you? Where can people follow you?
That'll be what the next generation does. Since we have to constantly shift language, they'll get rid of following
Totally.
as a thing. I don't know what they'll call it instead, but that's up to them to figure out. You can find me and be in community with me at Ray Curenton, RayCurenton on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Where can people follow you?
They can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Tim Dillinger, and you can find me on Substack for my bi-weekly newsletter, God's Music is My Life. Bi-weekly free newsletter. We're not, subsidizing. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
All right. Until next time, I guess.
Be sure to like, comment, and share with your friends.
But don't follow.
Yeah.
It's time to face the music. Think I'm getting to the point where I know that I can't keep lying to myself. Time to block out all the noise and accept the cards dealt to me. Something's gotta give in me, 'cause I can't turn nowhere else. 'Cause maybe if I look inside where love resides, I'll see my way, I'm sure. The truth is mine to find behind that door. Turning to honesty, only you can show you yourself honestly, and it will save the day. Just make an honest plea and watch want your transformation, 'cause in all honesty, it hurts, but it may be the only. Saying I can change the world, but I'm stuck in self-denial. Searching through the script, but I never find the lines, words that can help me breathe. Want this part of who I am and my faith to reconcile. No, it won't be easy, but it's the word that's birthed in me. 'Cause maybe if I look inside, I'll realize the all of who I am is all that I'm supposed to be. Finally, I'll be free to live in honesty. Only you can show you yourself honestly, and it will save the day. Just make an honest plea and watch a transformation, 'cause in all honesty, it hurts, but it may be the only way. Honesty, it hurts, but it may be the only way. Honesty, it hurts, but it may be